Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on grant writing. My name is Greg Smith. I'm Executive Director of the Florida Literacy Coalition. And I've spent pretty much my whole career working in adult education and literacy. And over that time have had the opportunity to write a whole lot of grants. And I'm happy to say most of them were funded, but I had my fair share of those that were not funded. And that's never a fun email to get, but it certainly can be a learning experience. And it was for me, certainly early on in my career, as you kind of learn from what works and what doesn't work through the process. There's no great mystery to this. I think most folks who are competent writers are certainly fully capable of writing successful grant proposals. And in my current job here at FLC, we provide grants in a number of different areas. So I've been able to see it from that vantage point as well, creating grant applications and reviewing them. So both as somebody who's applied for grants and also reviewed grants, I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what I've learned over the years, and also I've drawn from other experts as well. Now, this is an introductory session, so please keep that in mind. This is sort of looking at the fundamentals of grant writing. And I do want to thank the Florida Department of Education for supporting this and all of the webinars that we do here at FLC. If you do have questions during the webinar, please feel free to add those to the chat, and then toward the end we'll certainly open it up if folks are interested in asking questions verbally. We will also be posting an evaluation at the end, a session evaluation, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete that. So let's go ahead and get started. So you have a good idea for a project, and now what? So I know there's a variety of reasons why people write grant proposals. I'm going to take sort of the perspective that you're kind of looking at something as somebody who's really new to the process, and you have a good idea and you want to pursue that. So you do want to kind of look at sort of the big picture to start with, knowing who you are and what you want to accomplish through that, and knowing what needs to be done and how you want to achieve it. Those are kind of the fundamental pieces with regard to the very big picture. And then you also want to make sure that you have a pretty good feeling and understanding that your organization, of your organization, and hopefully it being well-grounded. Most successful grant seekers are those who strategically plan their efforts rather than more indiscriminately pursue funding opportunities. So reviewing and making sure you understand your organization's mission, reviewing your ability to deliver services, understanding sort of the funding landscape in terms of who the funders are, who's out there, who your potential competitors are, at least others that are sort of going to be seeking similar funding for similar purposes, prioritizing, of course, your own needs, and partnerships are a big piece of it. We're not going to delve into partnerships in a big way, but a lot of successful grant proposals, especially these days, funders really do value programs that have partners or collaborators in the process. Key components involved in preparing a grant proposal. Well, the planning process is important. I think it's just as important as the writing process, as you're researching and identifying potential funders and really just kind of looking at what you want to do and making sure you put the building blocks in place, organizing your budget, and then writing your proposal. And we'll kind of delve into this in a little bit more deep way here. So I'm a big fan of developing a concept paper if you have a new initiative on the front end. Really doing something that's not a full proposal, that really gives you or gives the reader and you as the developer a clear idea of what you want to pursue and how you want to pursue it. So, what is the problem that you want to tackle, and what do you want to do about it? How do you want to do it? How much will it cost? And how will you know when you succeed? These are sort of the fundamental questions. And funders are increasingly interested in a concept paper approach. We've used it with some of our larger funders when we were first starting. And I think it's a win-win situation if the funders are open to it, because it allows you to share your vision for what you're interested in doing in a more succinct way, just to get an idea as to whether this might be a good fit for the funder. They recognize that it's, it would save you time, hopefully, and also save them time, and, just make sure that, that before you go into a full proposal phase, that you're kind of on the same page, and at least that they're open to funding your idea. So I know sometimes concept papers are not, an option, but if they are, I think it can be a really nice tool as you have communication with a potential funder. Even if it's not, I think it's a good tool internally so that you know exactly what you want to do. Looking at potential funders, researching and identifying potential funders, here's a few resources, and I'd encourage any of you who have additional resources to go ahead and add them to the chat. The Foundation Center is one of the most prominent organizations in the country that collects and shares information about funders. They have a very extensive database, and they have a process where you can subscribe. It's quite expensive, but they also have a local information network affiliates where you can go and access that information. A lot of local libraries are subscribed to the Foundation Center, state and community colleges and things of that nature. There's over 100 of them here in Florida, so there's likely one that's nearby. Maybe if you're a patron of your local library, you may even have home access or business access to that through your library card. FundsNet is another free resource that lists grant opportunities and funders. Grant Station, likewise, that one is for there's a fee attached to that. TechSoup, hopefully most of you are familiar with TechSoup. It's a great resource for getting discounted software and other resources. They occasionally, at least in the past, have run specials where they allow you full access to the Grant Station for 1 year, and it's traditionally been about $100. So that one's more affordable. And then I want to do a shout out to community foundations, and all of these are links here that you can link on. This is a link to the list of the community foundations throughout Florida, and they often have good resources, not only for researching potential grant opportunities or funders, but also they quite often have courses or other resources that you can access to hone your skills as a grant writer. Specifically in adult education and literacy, I wanted to share some sources for supporting these efforts. I'd like to be able to say there's a huge number of foundations and corporations operating at the national and state level that do this work. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but these are probably familiar names to many of you. Here in Florida, certainly the Florida Department of Education is the largest single funder of adult education and literacy by far. They have a pretty detailed grant application process. It's quite a lengthy application, but community-based nonprofits are eligible to apply, at least for the federal dollars that are available through the department. Dollar General Literacy Foundation is by far the largest corporate or foundation funder in the United States. I think many of you probably have tapped into this. They have several different grant opportunities that they make available annually, and their focus really has been literacy in terms of their philanthropic efforts right from the very beginning. And that's in part due to their founder who struggled with literacy skills, and that's been something they've been quite committed to. So you can look to them. They usually do their application, I think, around December thereabouts. They put it out. Nora Roberts Foundation. Nora Roberts, a successful author, gives money to a number of different adult education literacy programs throughout the state. Excuse me, throughout the country, but some of them have been here in Florida. So you might want to check them out. Pro Literacy is doing more on the funding front. They have their Literacy Opportunity Fund. They also have a National Book Fund, which is, not dollars, but you can get books. There's a similar software fund that allows you to get access to software. The Wish You Well Foundation, that is a smaller foundation than Nora Roberts, but that is also sort of author-based. Author David Baldacci started that. It's out of Virginia, and they have also funded some programs here in Florida. The Volunteer Florida Foundation has a variety of different kinds of opportunities, not specific to adult education literacy per se, but certainly a potentially a good resource. They also operate or are affiliated with sort of the AmeriCorps programs that are operated here in Florida. And so if you're interested in pursuing an AmeriCorps or AmeriCorps Vista program. And I wanted to also do a shout out to the Florida Humanities. They have a relatively new initiative they've been doing for a couple of years now called English for Families. This is for libraries that are interested in doing family literacy programming. I believe they just made their grants for the year, but something that you can kind of take a look at for next year. One thing I do want to mention actually before I move on from this topic is that I would encourage you to not just focus on foundations and corporations that have had a history in supporting adult literacy and ESL, family literacy programs. I would cast a broader net. Look for programs, look for foundations, and some of them, have, most of them will have some sort of funding focus area, but sometimes they're quite broad, around sort of education more broadly, human services, workforce readiness, immigration, immigrant support services, these kinds of focus areas, could definitely be a good fit for our types of programs. So don't limit yourself when you go into those databases to only search on adult literacy. I think a broader search can also be quite beneficial. Now, I want to share a little bit about some of the funding opportunities that we have here at FLC annually. We have our health literacy grants that are supported through Florida Blue Foundation, and this is our longest standing grant we've been doing for over 12 years now, and we're very appreciative to their support to provide funds to local programs to incorporate health education and health literacy into their adult education literacy, family literacy, ESL instruction. Those are grants of up to $5,000, and that RFA or request for applications usually comes out around December, so you can be on the lookout for that. We have a similar relationship with Wells Fargo in supporting financial literacy grants and sort of incorporating financial education into your instruction. Those are likewise $5,000 grants. That one should be, well, that's pending right now. We are reapplying. They've invited us to reapply for that grant. So be provisional on getting that funding. But if that comes through, we'd probably be looking at around September, August, September for that grant opportunity to come available. We have a family literacy grant that's made possible through the support of the Kislak Family Foundation. We just announced the grant recipients on that. We are likewise sort of in a pending position in terms of whether we'll be able to renew that for next year, but we do have an application out with them. So if that comes through, kind of be on the lookout for that next, probably March, thereabouts. Southwest Airlines, that's not a dollar thing, but Southwest Airlines has been a longstanding supporter of FLC and community-based literacy programs here in Florida. And so they make available some tickets that we then redistribute, and we have sort of a ticket contest. So this is an opportunity. I'm sure some of you have done that. I know Joe has gotten some, and others here. So that's usually tickets that are used for fundraising purposes to help you with your auctions or other fundraising events. And then our next grant that's actually going to be coming out, and the Southwest Airlines one traditionally comes out in around October. And then the next one that we have coming out will be a continuation for year 2 of our innovation grants. It's a little bit scaled back. They didn't provide quite as much funding, but we are going to be able to offer several grants for $3,500 for program innovation, and that's supported through Simply Healthcare. And look for that application to come out in next month. We're looking at sort of late July for that. So you can go to our website and kind of keep posted on that. You can also take a look at our website. We have the applications from prior years up there, so you can kind of take a look at what we've done in the past. We don't usually change it very much. So if you're interested in kind of finding out a little bit more, and maybe positioning yourself to apply for one of these grants, I'd encourage you to go and check out the applications from last year. Okay, so one area I think that's really important, this is kind of gets back to the planning process, is really doing your homework on the front end, in finding out as much as you can about the potential funders that you're going to be applying for, or applying to, I should say. So reviewing annual reports, certainly application guidelines, of course, descriptions of their programs, PR opportunities. Are there positive PR or other opportunities for employees to be involved? Some funders really weigh that pretty heavily, and narrowing the field to those who are the most likely funders, of course. Some funders are open to being contacted on the front end, have a little bit of a discussion on your concept. Others are not, but you can definitely try that out. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Usually, even if they're not interested in kind of talking about the specifics of what you're interested in proposing, they're certainly willing to answer questions about their own application process. I think when you're looking at grant makers, these are folks who basically want to have an impact on the population or a community, in a positive way. So just taking a look at whether you align with their goals, and what's the history that they have. You can go in and take a look at their 990s and see what their giving history has been, or sometimes that's posted on their websites as well, just to kind of see if similar kinds of organizations have been funded in the past. There's often a high interest from funders in, if you're able to leverage some of the resources that they provide. That's something that we always emphasize here at FLC, that a contribution of X dollars will be leveraged to gain additional support through volunteers, other value added that comes as part of the grant, or other funders that you're able to secure because you have sort of that foundational funding to start with. And then, of course, are you capable of implementing and managing the grant? That's something that they definitely want to look at. So, we have had grants here, and our grants aren't real large, but sometimes we've had, grant organizations that are asking for $10,000 when their budget is $15,000. Well, this is the kind of thing that, you sort of got to take a look at, because, if the grant represents a huge percentage of what their sort of operating budget as an organization is, then, that's something that, might catch the attention of the funder. It doesn't mean that it will, be a deal breaker, but it's definitely something I think they'll be taking a look at. So you want to make sure also that you're capable of implementing. One of the most important things is being able to follow through and do what you said you're going to do. This is kind of common sense stuff, but you'll be surprised that, or you may or may not be surprised that a lot of folks sort of just don't follow the basic directions. So that's kind of a core element that we found, at least in some of our applications. So reading that request for applications or request for proposals and following the directions, clearly addressing all the sections. You know, if you come across a section that you feel doesn't pertain to you, don't just leave it blank. You know, put something in there saying that it's not applicable, or, you know, something that, you know, indicates that you read it and, you know, it's not something that you're, you know, you're just skipping over or didn't notice. Submitting grants in the required format. So if, you know, they say they want it 5 pages, then make sure you give them 5 pages, 5 pages single space, do that. You know, don't give them 7 or 8 pages if they want that. You know, just make sure everything is in accordance with what they've asked for in the application. And I think internally, you really do need to kind of do a cost benefit analysis, make sure that you can afford this program and that you're building into that what you need to be able to successfully execute the grant, and it's not going to be too much of a burden on your organization to do that you can really follow through. So the request for proposals will give you a lot of good information, you know, hopefully, if it's well structured, on what kind of grant funds are available, what types of projects they're interested in funding through that, who are the eligible applicants. Make sure that you fit that eligibility requirement. There's you know, geographical considerations sometimes that funders only want to fund in a certain region or a certain type of organization. These kinds of things, you definitely want to make sure you're keyed in on that. You know, look at how they score the applications. If they do share that information, giving you a scoring rubric can be helpful. The timeline for funding the programs, make sure that that works with you and for you, and that you're making sure that you're getting the applications in on time, of course. As I mentioned, formatting and the evaluation component is an important piece. If they have specific ways that they want or expectations around how you're going to evaluate the programs, you need to, you know, be cognizant of that and responsive to that. Let me stop there for a second. Are there any questions so far? Do I have any, Stephanie?
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. You can unmute yourself if anybody has a question. Okay, go ahead and go on. And this PowerPoint, by the way, will be available. Stephanie's going to be posting it here in a few minutes or toward the end of the session. So I should have mentioned that earlier. You don't need to take detailed notes on this. This will be available in all those sections that sort of were blue and underlined. Those are all hyperlinks, so you can link right over to all those resources. So moving on to sort of the process of writing your proposal. These are sort of the core areas that I found for most proposals. Now, there certainly will be deviations from this, but I think if you're kind of looking at a planning process and you don't know specifically what the requirements of an applicant, of a funder are, you can kind of work through these sort of broader areas, I think, and probably have a pretty good, you know, pretty good structure and a pretty good document that you can modify if you need to, depending on a particular funder's application requirements. But these sections, introduction, or a problem or need statement, objectives, project or program description, evaluation, budget, and abstract are quite common. So we'll do a little bit of a review on these. So the introduction, you know, this is really the opportunity to establish your credibility as an organization, your success record, who you are, what your mission is, what your history is, who you serve, your accomplishments, and so forth. sometimes I'm asked, well, if it's a brand new organization, how do you do that? It's more challenging if you're brand new. But I do think if you have people who are part of the organization on the board, or as volunteers that have a background in this, you can sort of look to their experience and highlight their experience to kind of establish your own credibility. So this is really kind of establishing your organization as one that is well-grounded in the community and one that can be responsive and can successfully execute the proposal or the project that you're requesting funds for. The next area, this is very common, having a needs or problem statement. Looking to local data as much as you can provide to support evidence that you can use to support the need for the services that you want to provide. And, that should be directly related to the goals of the project and organization. So the data side, there are some good resources out there. The American Community Survey, which is part of the U.S. Census Bureau. So you have national U.S. Census data, the big census count that's done every 10 years, but then annually there's supplements to that through the American Community Survey, where they do sort of a representative sampling, and they have some good data in there, census related data, around as it relates to adult education and literacy, high school completion, how many people speak English or identify themselves as speaking English in their home, these kinds of things, years of school completed, whether they speak English well, again, identify whether they speak English well or not. So these are the kinds of things that you can draw from, and there's other good resources that are available through the American Community Survey. Now, PIAC is our big national study that's done every 10 years on adult literacy, essentially adult competencies. So you should be able to get good data. Well, every county, there's an estimate for each of the counties in terms of how many adults read at or below a basic literacy skill level. And they have several levels there. And we tend to, most adult education organizations are sort of in level 1 and 2. And that's, I'm sure many of you are already using a lot of that data. 1 in 5 adult Floridians sort of fall in that below basic level. So that's certainly data you want to share right from the get-go if you're interested in supporting or having an adult literacy program supported. U.S. Department of Education has some good resources as well. The Bureau of Economic and Business Research here in Florida. Also some good data. You're looking at data in terms of income levels and a variety of different kinds of things that might tie to adult education and literacy. The Florida scorecard that's put out by the Florida Chamber of Commerce gives some nice data points that might very well tie in well with what you're doing. And they do that by county as well. The ALICE report that's done every couple of years, looking at a variety of data, and this sort of is adult, I would say, asset limited, income constrained adults in Florida who may not be sort of, under the traditional, legal definition of poverty, but certainly are really challenged in terms of what their income levels are, and data that pertains to that population, which I think is largely the population that we often serve. And then the county health rankings actually are not just health rankings. This is put out by University of Wisconsin and funded through the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, and has a lot of good data in there. That some of it is health related, but also education level, and income and poverty. There's a lot of good stuff just there. That's a really good one-stop shop that has a lot of good stuff that draws from the census and from other studies. This is just a little thing I wanted to share just because it's on our website, maybe in an area where you might not see it otherwise. So I just wanted to kind of call this out. So when the PAC data was released by state and counties, we went in and kind of did a cross-reference with census data. So we've done some of the heavy lifting for you with regard to county data, and these are spreadsheets, if you click on them, that kind of cross-reference, how many folks are at PAC level 1 and 2, and kind of combine that with other data sets that could be useful to you, like, foreign-born residents, residents who don't speak English well, residents living below 150% of poverty, education level, race and ethnicity. So this is the website's down on the bottom there. Feel free to use this. You can go in and kind of check out your county. And we've already kind of done some of that sort of cross-referencing in terms of being able to have all the data in one place that, are sort of the common data sets you might be looking to. Okay, so let's move on to goals and objectives. This is an area that is really quite important for a lot of grantors, and just I like this little I don't know, let's call it a gimmick, but this little tool to kind of look at whether your goals are really what they need to be, or objectives, or being specific, being measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So SMART goals. And when we look at objectives, I wanted to kind of put it in the context of sort of process objectives and outcome objectives. I think sort of two areas, and sometimes there's some confusion around this. So the process objectives are really sort of more of the output objectives. What are the services that you'll be delivering, and quantifying your plan to deliver those. So examples of that would be maybe designing a website, or conducting classes or tutoring programs and serving a certain number of adults. And then your outcome objectives would be really sort of the so what piece. What's the impact going to be, and what's the evidence that that you're moving the needle in some way to help people. So looking at how many folks achieve an educational functioning level, looking at survey data perhaps. And I think in adult ed we often underutilize survey data from our own students, and getting their feedback as to whether what they're learning has helped them, and if so, how has it helped them. And in this particular goal here, objective, having certain percentage of your employed students indicating that what they've learned through their involvement in your program has helped them in their jobs. And I know sometimes it's hard to project a percentage. The best thing is to kind of look at your history, to be able to make some, have some objectives that are doable. You definitely don't want to overshoot the mark and then not deliver. It's probably better to be a little bit more conservative, and and then it looks good to to exceed your goals. Are we good on any questions there, Stephanie, or does anybody have a question on any of this? I'm kind of
Nothing in the chat yet.
okay. So I think we're gonna probably wrap this up a little early, but let's move on to project description. Now this piece is really the heart of the proposal, at least from my perspective. And this will really kind of tell the reader who's on the review committee. And if any of you have an opportunity to participate and be on a review committee, I'd highly encourage you to do that. I know the Department of Education has readers from time to time. We have independent review committees. A lot of the funders will, have opportunities. I mean, sometimes the foundations sort of have their own system, but there are occasionally opportunities that come up for people to read and review and be part of a grant review committee. And I'd certainly encourage you to do that, because it'll really give you a good perspective on sort of from the other side, what folks are looking for. But this piece, with the description, really provides sort of the fundamentals of what your hoping to do, presenting the project hopefully in clear and understandable way, and in the sequence and flow of what's going to be happening in the activities, including details on how the project will be staffed, using concise language, simple language as much as you can. Bottom line, the reader should be able to clearly understand how the structure of the project will enable you to successfully achieve your objectives. And they'll be kind of taking a look at that and making a judgment call as to whether you kind of have the pieces in place to really make this a success, and whether you've articulated that. The evaluation piece, this is really dependent on sort of what the project is and what the expectations are with regard to evaluation. So some of our grants, for example, have some evaluation tools that are sort of built into the system. Like for our health literacy, we'll have a pre and post health literacy assessment, student survey. So there's sort of fundamentals that are part of the expectation that that grant recipients agree to utilize when they take the grants. That's true of the Department of Education grants as well. They have a very specific structure around the National Reporting System, or NRS, in terms of which assessment tools are acceptable, and doing testing, reporting on that testing, and so forth. But some of the funders will not really know what you're doing or really how to evaluate it, and that gives you an opportunity to sort of assess what your evaluation looks like. So this should be consistent with what you're doing in most of your program. But if you're starting something new, you might need to look at some new ways to evaluate and assess whether what you're doing is working or not. So outlining your system for collecting and communicating your results, and describing if you're using some sort of testing instrument and so forth. And when possible, describing how the project might contribute to one of the funders or sponsors' goals. Again, that's tying in to sort of their priorities, if you can. The budget provides a financial description of the project, and hopefully with some notes on the details of this. This is really often one of the first things folks look at when they read a proposal, even though it might be toward the end. I think a lot of folks skip ahead and really take a look at what you're asking for in terms of the budget line items. They should match with what is in the proposal. And it's not unusual for us to see with our grants that there's something or items in the proposal that really don't seem to equate to anything that was mentioned in the project description or sort of the narrative of the budget. So that's a big red flag for folks. You want to make sure that it reflects the project and what the kinds of costs and expenditures that you would typically think you would be including in a project like that. And if it's something that's a little bit different, then make sure to explain why you need that in the budget notes. I think it's a good idea. Usually there's a lot of funders will give you as we do, give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about in-kind donations. So this is where you can really value facilities that are donated. Volunteers can be a great way to reflect the value added through in-kind donations. Contributions from local restaurants if they're providing catering. There's a range of different kinds of things that could fall into this category, really to show that you're not only depending on this particular organization or funder, or if you have other funders as well that are contributing to the initiative. And then the abstract, I typically will do this at the end, but some people do it on the front end. But this is sort of your umbrella statement or your case statement, summarizing your proposal. And this one can be kind of tough. It's because it's it's short and sweet, and you want to be able to kind of get concise and get to the point on this. So sometimes that's better done after you've kind of gone through the rest of the application, and you kind of give it a little bit of time, maybe step back for a day or two, and then come back and kind of do this sort of overarching abstract statement. So let's talk a little bit about, well, those are sort of the fundamentals of the application process. Any questions so far?
Not yet in the chat.
Okay, so let me move on to AI. So, and I'm not an expert on AI, so let me preface it with that. But I've been using it more and more lately in some of our applications, some of our reports. I think it can be a great tool for your reporting on the back end as well. So folks, you probably heard of ChatGPT. It's been all over the news. I asked ChatGPT to give me a 40-word statement or 40 words or less what generative AI is, and this is what it came up with, which I thought was pretty good. Using artificial intelligence to create new content. Now, for this, it probably would be text, but you can do images and even music. Learning from this broad range of data that they pulled in from the internet and other data sets to create something that looks like it mimics a human creative process, producing results that resemble human generated work. And it's pretty remarkable. I don't know how many folks have used it, have played around with it a little bit, but and it's evolving by the month. So it's really pretty hard to kind of keep up with the latest on it, but it's a tool that's definitely worth taking a look at. Now, I've listed here the 3 largest generative AI tools or platforms. ChatGPT's got a lot of play. Microsoft Copilot and Gemini, which is formerly Bard from Google. I'm throwing into the mix Perplexity, which I've been using more and more, which I think is really a pretty cool generative AI. All of these are free, by the way, at least in sort of their basic format. So how can AI be used in your grant writing process? Well, there's a number of different ways that come to mind, and there may be some that are in addition to this, but I think, even
I don't want him to hear us. We're muted, right?
Excuse me, is there a question? Oh, okay.
There are 2 questions in the chat.
Okay. Can you read those, Stephanie? I'm not seeing the chat. Right?
Yeah, for sure. First question was, how does the abstract differ from the introduction?
The abstract would be just an overview. It would be an overview of your project or initiative that you're doing. The introduction is more sort of organizational focused. So looking at what your history and your accomplishments are, who you are, what you do. So in some cases, they may be very close. If you're writing a proposal that's just to sort of to fund your overall organization, program, operations, they may be very close. If you're writing a proposal to fund a specific initiative within your organization, then the abstract would really articulate what that initiative is all about. You really want to be looking to, share much information about sort of your overall program. That would be included in the introduction instead.
Appreciate it. The next question was, could we submit a concept paper if the funder only funds by invitation?
Yeah, the invitation only, that's kind of a tough one. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that it doesn't hurt to introduce yourself to a funder, even if they don't have an open application process. Now, some of them may very well be very close to that and have very specific ideas of who they want to fund. But getting yourself in front of these folks and maybe writing a letter or email, sort of introducing who you are and and the idea that you have in mind, maybe not kind of producing at that point the full concept paper that's kind of feels like a little bit of a mini proposal, but more of a, maybe more of a sort of a general inquiry kind of thing. But I do know that folks have had some success reaching out to funders who are by invitation only and kind of getting themselves in front of them. And maybe it's not something that materializes right away, but you're kind of in their lexicon then of of programs that they're aware of. Huge national foundations is probably not going to work, but if you have a local funder, or if you know somebody who is on the board or has some kind of connection with the foundation or funder or corporation, you can kind of use those channels potentially as well. So it is tough, though. I want to spend a huge amount of time kind of pursuing those that are by invitation only. But if you feel that given where they serve, their giving history and things of that nature, that it could be a good fit for them to, they may have some interest in funding you, then I would definitely reach out to them and make an inquiry.
We had a little bit of a follow-up question. Could you give some insight into what the department or position could be for the foundations or organizations that they need to address? Like, would the right person be a director or a
who in the
engagement? Yeah.
Who in the foundation? Is that what you're saying?
Believe so.
Saying, yeah, okay. Usually there's somebody who's kind of in charge of grants management, but that really differs. Some of these foundations are very small. They're all volunteer. They might have just one person. So I don't have a definitive answer for that. But if they have a website where they have something around somebody who's sort of looks like they're in a position that manages grants, they may be the best one to reach out to. I think if you reach out to anybody, they can kind of channel it to the right person. I wouldn't get too worried about kind of making sure that you have the absolute right person you're sending it to. They'll get inquiries as we do, and we just channel them to the right person, internally. So don't let that hold you up.
Appreciate it. And there was a last question. I'm not sure if it's applied towards us, but if anyone can drop in the chat if they've applied for a USCIS grant for the citizenship training.
Has anybody applied for USCIS? Unmute yourself if you have, and if you want to say a few words about that. Sounds like maybe
I put that question in there, and we're getting emails from them, and we're a little bit nervous. Do we even want to be on their radar? I don't know about other organizations, but we do not ask if our students are citizens or not. And I know it makes them nervous to think they might be visible. So we wondered if you applied for one of their grants that you might become more visible.
Oh, okay, that's an interesting question. I have not ever heard of, I mean, the USCIS, the citizenship and naturalization side, that's kind of like the friendly side.
Oh, that's the friendly side.
USCIS, yeah. And so I've never heard of any, USCIS in any way, shape, or form, to my knowledge, at least, kind of using it as an opportunity to gain information that they might be useful, in deportation efforts and things of that nature. So I don't know exactly what they require in terms of information provided about students. Usually if it's, the citizenship and naturalization, there's certain core criteria just for eligibility. And so usually the folks who are, enrolled in those programs, taking advantage of the citizenship
Are eligible,
process
yeah.
and so forth, are usually eligible. You do need to consult. I mean, you don't need to consult an attorney necessarily, but you do need to be very cognizant that you don't want to be sending in that N400 application, if you're not documented. That could be definitely So
That would
there's
be a red flag.
yeah, that would be definitely a red flag. So, people want to be informed enough that they're not submitting information, and it want to be useful to you either. So,
Right.
that whole, everything's changing, there's been major changes in the last couple of weeks around that. And now if you are married to a US citizen, and have been here in the country for 10 years, then you're going to have a pathway for legal residence, I guess, at least. That's what the Biden administration has done through executive action. We'll see if that holds up in the courts or not. So things are changing on a day-to-day basis, but I wouldn't be too concerned about, not applying for that grant because you think that they're going to be kind of using, information you provide to, ferret out people who might,
Helping immigrants, yeah.
support. Yeah. So I think you'd probably be okay.
Greg,
It's a good grant.
Greg, here at Catholic Charity, we do have the USCIS grant
do?
for the
Okay.
citizenship. No, I mean, I guess, since in order for you to know if they're eligible for citizenship, you need to have their green card. So
Right.
those are the only people you can serve anyways. They have
Right.
to have been in the country for 5 years and have a LPR, a green card for 5 years. So if they don't have it, then you wouldn't be able to serve them
Right.
anyway. So you will have to require documentation in order for you to serve them under that grant.
Right. And you wouldn't be providing them with information about any of your other students, right? You're only going to be providing them with their people.
Only the citizenship, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
So I think you should be good in that regard. Okay, good.
thank
So
you.
getting back to AI here. So these are some areas that AI can help you sort of in an assistive way. I wouldn't be looking to have ChatGPT write your proposal for you, but in certain ways it can be quite helpful. So sort of on that sort of front end, generating proposal ideas, developing a plan, helping you maybe develop an outline or concept paper as we discussed for your project, asking the ChatGPT or other AI tool for ideas based on what other adult education and literacy programs have done. So there's opportunities here to kind of have AI kind of be a researcher for you, both in terms of sort of ideas, as well as helping you kind of refine and maybe develop a preliminary plan of action, collecting and sharing data and statistics. It can be useful as well. Although I find that it's very, at least ChatGPT in particular, has been kind of inconsistent when it comes to, collecting, sharing data. So you got to be really careful about that and check the original sourcing around statistics and so forth, because sometimes it'll create stuff. It sounds quite authoritative, but it's not necessarily true about a range of topics. So this kind of goes true. It goes for anything that it's generating, but if it's going out and sourcing stuff for you, it's different than if it's taking something that you give it and you're asking for feedback on it. So those are two important distinctions. And that feedback piece, or that that assistive piece around refining your proposal language, I think is probably really the area that it can be used most strongly. I mean, it is quite remarkable its capacity to kind of help to rewrite or rephrase contents, to summarize or make language more concise. And as you know, a lot of applications will have word limits or character limits in terms of your responses. And so you want to put everything in there that you can think of, and it says it's limited to 200 words, and yours is 350 words. So ChatGPT, by giving it a prompt to have it summarize and make the statement or make the information more concise, I think it's just a good practice too, to be able to write things in a succinct way, even if you're not limited by sort of word limit or character limits within the application. One of my favorite quotes along these lines is by Mark Twain, who once wrote, I didn't have time. He's writing a letter to a friend of his. Said, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. So, it's not easy to, write in a concise way, and ChatGPT and other Perplexity and other tools can really help you in that process. You may or may not like what it says, and you can prompt it to make some revisions, or I like this piece and I don't like that, and have it rewrite. So it's not sort of a one and done kind of thing. You can have AI kind of help you through that refining process. Also, if you want something to be more formal or less formal or more persuasive, these kinds of things are also tools that are available through AI to really help you sort of refine your language. Finding gaps and providing recommendations on your draft proposal. So you can ask the AI tool to proofread what you're doing. You can ask it to review the proposal, maybe the full proposal or a section of the proposal, using the criteria set out in the grant guidelines. So you can have it do sort of an analysis, make sure that you're not missing anything that it says it's important, and it'll spit back something. You might not necessarily agree with it, but at least you can use that as a tool and say, oh yeah, that makes a good point. The proposal specifically asks for XYZ, and we didn't really speak to that very directly. I definitely wouldn't want you to rely too much on AI, and certainly not to produce your final proposal. There's potential ethical issues on that if it's sort of writing the thing for you, but even that aside, it's just is not, it's probably not at the point where it should, it's really a good product to kind of do the soup to nuts. It's more of a sort of an assistant, I think, to be able to give you some guidance and some suggestions. And I'm going to give you a few examples here of how a few things that I did with ChatGPT, just to give you an idea of it. Are folks using ChatGPT? Maybe do a little raise of hands, little electronic hands, or any other AI. Okay, so a few here. Let me give you an example of just a couple simple ways that I tried it out for, that I've used it in a number of different ways, but just for the purposes of preparing for this. So I gave it this prompt. I gave both ChatGPT and Perplexity this prompt. I'm writing a grant proposal. I need to develop a needs statement of 200 words or less for Orange County, Florida, that has information on the number of adults in the community who have low literacy skills or limited English language skills, and how this affects their income, employment prospects, and quality of life. So what I got back from Perplexity, which was actually the better of the two, so I'm sharing that one. The ChatGPT version of it did not have the statistics that you're seeing here. So it was a much more generalized kind of statement, but Perplexity gave this statement. Orange County, as you can see, approximately 400,000 adults, or 1 in 4 only read at a below basic literacy level. So it's giving you some good data there. This low level literacy significantly impacts their quality of life, employment. Adults with limited literacy skills face challenges performing essential tasks, and so forth. Around 47% of children in Orange County are considered not ready for kindergarten based on their literacy skills, perpetuating an intergenerational cycle of low literacy. Children of parents with low literacy are 72% more likely to have low reading levels themselves. So it's taken some data that's sort of more generalized national data and mixed it with some of the stuff around sort of specific to Orange County. It also included a little bit in the end there about Orange County the Adult Literacy League and Orange County Library offering programs. That might not be a piece you'd want to include on this particular one, but it gives you a sense of what it can produce. And then I asked it, okay, so maybe 200 words is more than I need, but maybe go into 130 words. So I asked it to do take the same thing and rework it in 130 words or less and keep the statistics. So it came up with this. So you can really kind of refine it. I would suggest, at least what has worked for me, is to kind of start a little bit broader, have it write it, something a little bit more, if you want something that's 130 words, start it at 200 or 250 and see what it comes up with, and then kind of have it refine it from there, because there may be components that you might want to pull from that original section, and you can ask it to incorporate that, build this part out, or, make sure that you're emphasizing this component. So it's quite remarkable in how it is able to kind of do that kind of analysis in writing. Another prompt, sort of sticking with Orange County here, I asked it to write in 150 words or less to provide an overview of the Adult Literacy League, which is a nonprofit literacy organization here in Florida, in Orange County or in Orlando. It does have a pretty good website that has a lot of good information about what they're doing, so I used it for that purpose. So to look at the websites, the mission, the programs and services, specifically from their website. So this 150-word prompt. So this is what it came up with from ChatGPT. The Literacy League's dedicated to transforming lives through literacy and education. Their mission focuses on empowering adults in Central Florida and personalized instruction to enhance literacy skills. Adult Literacy League offers various programs tailored to meet the diverse needs, including one-to-one tutoring, English language instruction, and so forth. So I thought this is pretty decent. It's a little, from my perspective, a little flowery, doesn't have as much detail as I might like to see about the specifics of the organization. I kind of looked at this and said, well, this probably could apply to a lot of community-based organizations. So I asked Perplexity to do the same thing, same prompt, same exact prompt, and it came up with this one. And this one I thought was stronger because it talks about the mission, talks specifically about the programs, how many students that they're serving, how many classes that they offer, what counties they serve, and so forth. So I thought this was a little bit stronger. You could take both of them and feed them both in and ask it to rework it. Or pull from one or the other. So part of why I wanted to share this was that there are differences between the AI tools that are out there in terms of what they produce. So I would strongly recommend, if you're going to be doing this, to try a few of them. Try a few of them out. If you find one that works better for you, you can kind of use that maybe as your primary one. But if you're kind of getting down to brass tacks, I would suggest feeding the same prompt as I did for this into a couple different, 2 or 3 different AI tools and seeing which one produces the better result for you. So there's a lot of potential here with regard to using AI. Again, I'm not an expert, but I do think that there's going to be more and more of this, and as the tools evolve, there's going to be even more opportunities to use AI as an effective tool for grant writing. So, questions? Okay, I'm going to wrap up with just a few tips from grant reviewers. And some of this is sort of a recap of what we've been talking about. Following directions, very important. Start with what is easiest. That's a strategy that works for a lot of folks. Sometimes writing a proposal, especially if it's a lengthy proposal, can be a little bit daunting. So maybe taking it, in a segmented way, little bits, and don't have to tackle it all. at one time and maybe start with, the easiest components first. Avoiding jargon, especially if it's for a funder that, is not really familiar with, your type of organization or our field. Don't use terms like ABE and even ESL without sort of at least explaining on the front end what they are. Using action verbs, being concise, as we've talked about, certainly more from my vantage point is not better. Requiring, this kind of goes back to the directions, but using or including all the requirements that are, the attachments that are required, I should say. Now, sometimes there's optional attachments, letters of support and things of that nature, which can be very helpful. And definitely encourage you maybe to consider doing those. But if it's a required attachment, you definitely got to make sure you do that. Or if you don't have that attachment, that you at least explain why that's the case. Be consistent, in terms of what you're explaining and making sure everything ties together. This is another area where AI might be able to kind of give you some guidance. Don't inflate your figures in hopes of getting less than what you request. So this is a common thing that people do. Well, I can do this for 20 grand, but let me ask for 30, and they probably cut me back, and at least I'll get what I need, kind of thing. And I think that's a flawed strategy, because at least good funders will kind of look at what you're doing, the scope of what you're doing, and see if that's a good value for what you're asking. So if you're overinflating figures, that can really come back to bite you. I mentioned endorsement letters, leaving enough time. So don't wait till the very last minute. And we've had some folks, when we used to have it, now we have an electronic format for our grants, but when we had them as more of a paper-based system, we had people, it was pretty common that people were, even driving sometimes, a couple hours to get it over to us in time, kind of thing. So, don't stress yourself out. Build in a timetable so that you're leaving enough time to get it in with a little time to spare, just in case things don't work out quite as planned. Reviewing the grant application, as I mentioned, we have them available on our website from the last cycle. You can kind of look at that, and before an application is officially released, and really start to prepare even ahead of time. Take advantage of briefing sessions if they are offered by funders. Those can kind of give you some insight into what they're looking for and give you some good tips. Have somebody proofread it. Now, AI, ChatGPT or Perplexity, what have you, can do that proofreading, but I would not rely on AI to do that solely, to have somebody take a look at it, especially if it's somebody who's not really familiar with the ins and outs of what you're proposing, to kind of look at it from an outsider's perspective. To make sure that, you're not making certain assumptions, that people have a working knowledge of certain things that they might not have a working knowledge of, as well as, of course, proofreading it for grammar and punctuation and so forth. Demonstrating collaborative efforts, that partnership piece can be very important to a lot of funders, but it's also, I think, just good practice if you can do things in a way where you're involving other organizations or agencies. Discussing your history of success, as we said in the beginning, highlighting that, that's a big piece, that as funders want to look to fund successful programs. And if you have had a history of success, you definitely want to highlight that. Potential for future sustainability. This is one of the tougher questions. So I don't think it's a really fair question to ask, but sometimes funders will ask, how are you going to sustain this initiative past the funding period? And, at least when I've read this for a new program, I'm like, I'm just trying to get it funded initially. You're asking me how I'm going to sustain this in year 2 and 3 and 4 or whatever. I think it's good in that case to just be forthright. You don't have any, funders that are lined up, and I don't think most foundations or corporations would expect you to do that. But if you can speak to your history of being able to sustain, assuming that you have been able to sustain programs after the initial funding, you know, that'll go pretty far, I think, in terms of showing that you have a good track record in continuing programs. And then asking for comments if they do provide comments from the review committee to give you some feedback. So that's all I have. I want to wish you all luck, and luck is part of it, certainly. You know, there's things that are factors that are beyond your control, and there are factors that are certainly within your control, and sort of trying to figure out how best to structure things within those areas that are in your control. You could, you know, submit the same exact application, you know, 2 years apart to the same funder, and one would be successful and one's not, because there's a lot of things going on in terms of what they're looking to fund, or, you know, priorities that they might have and so forth, that, you know, are things that are not, you know, within your ability to change or affect. But I wouldn't discount reapplying. We fund programs all the time that, you know, were not successful in their initial application, but they come back and are successful later on. So do we have any questions, Stephanie, before we adjourn?
In the chat, we have mostly thanks for the great information, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah. And please fill out the evaluation if you can. We appreciate that. We do have a couple of other PD opportunities coming up here at the end of the month. We have a webinar next week. And it's on, help me out here, Stephanie, I've lost my note on that.
It's
on
the 26th.
Yeah.
We've got, I put them in the chat already in terms of links, but working with low-level ESOL students with little to no first language literacy will be on Wednesday next week, as well as we have 2 in-person ESOL symposiums, one in Palm Beach on Monday the 24th and one in Manatee on the 27th. And there's a registration link on SurveyMonkey for that as well.
Okay, and I see, Karen, you said, is Perplexity the other AI you have used? So yes, AI, I do like Perplexity. Oh, okay. Yeah, looks like Stephanie, you already responded to that. Okay, good. Okay, very good. So if there's no other questions, please do complete the evaluation. That's been posted as well, right, Stephanie, to the
Yes, sir.
chat. Okay, fantastic. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. I hope this has been somewhat helpful to you. I wish you all the best in your grant application future. I think you all are doing fantastic work, and I think that it's well worth funding, and I hope that you know, you have only the best of luck in applying for any applications that you feel might be a good fit for your organization. So
Thank
take
you.
care. I'll have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, everyone.